I'll go get the truck. All right. Here it is in all of its glory, I guess. This absolutely pristine example of a 2011-ish, I think, CBR 250R, I think they call them. CBR 250 something. It's rough, as you can tell. Salvage title, but it has a title, so that's a plus. And yeah, clearly been down. I don't know why it was salvaged, but it's going to be a good starter bike. Pretty much nothing is bolted to anything, so that's going to be, you know, one of the first things is kind of clean it up a little bit, but not too much, because again, this is just a first bike for Kayla. You know, God forbid she ever lays it down, but we don't want it to be a big deal if she like drops it. You know, like you come up to a stoplight and your foot slips and you drop it. Anyone who rides bikes probably understands that feeling. We want that to not be a big deal. So we want to clean it up a little bit so it's a little presentable. We don't want it to be too nice. And yeah, we just want to make it reliable. It runs really good. Pretty sure it needs a clutch. Obviously it needs mirrors, turn signals. It's decent from 10 feet, but we'll get some close-ups. The graphics are just something. And the paint on the tank is also just something. So yeah. Anyway, welcome to Kayla's first bike. Let's see if we can find a diamond in this rough. Maybe not a diamond, like a ruby. Maybe not a precious metal, like a
gem.
A gem. But like one of those ones you get out of a gumball machine. Let's see if we can find a gumball machine gem in the rough. Alright, so Kayla doesn't feel super confident yet, and that's totally fine. So I'm going to take it for a rip up and down the street. I'm a big proponent of wearing gear. This is not what I would normally wear, but just bear with me. It's a 250. I don't think it's going to get away from me. I'm pretty sure it needs a clutch, so I'm not sure it's even going to move. We're out in the sticks. I'm not going to be doing any wheelies or anything like that. So steel toes and shorts are going to cut it for me right now. I am going to wear a brain bucket. But yeah, we probably won't ever really do any performance modifications. At least I don't really anticipate that. Outside of just some like routine maintenance that it probably really wants or needs. But it's got oil. I made sure of that. And let's see if this thing will, I don't know, do 0 to 60. I've never even ridden a 250 in this class, like a super sport. So this ought to be kind of fun. Put around, see what it'll do. Just kind of get a little baseline before we start tinkering with it. You probably won't be able to hear me on the GoPro, but we'll try. Maybe you'll at least be able to see something. Hopefully she fires up. I think it is fuel injected, so it should run, I would hope. She's alive. That's gonna be, that's how you want that. Dynamic, adjusts itself. All right, here we go. Oh, this is goofy. I hate this. Something needs to happen with the clutch lever. Oh, everything bounces around. Nothing's bolted to anything up here, I don't think. It's got a rear brake. It's got a front brake. Not a great one, but they're there. We're not going to be going very fast anyway. Here's someone on a real motorcycle. How much do you want to bet we cannot catch it? So 0 to 60. Oh yeah, no fun. It runs. Oh, the clutch is struggling. Oh, it's bad. I should probably turn around before I push it, man. Yeah, let's get turned around. Hopefully it's just the clutch. But yeah, there does not appear to be any clutch, that's for sure. Or hardly any clutch. She kind of smells like clutch. These grips are just awful. Just falling off. Look at that. There's nothing going on out here. This is atrocious as well. I don't know what this is, but so yeah, she runs. Smells a little warm. Temp gauge looked good. Hopefully what we're smelling is just the clutch absolutely just destroying itself. But there you go. Let's get her cleaned up. All right, so I've got the bike up into the main workshop. We tore the fairings off, sprayed off with a pressure washer real quick just to make it a little more pleasant, and I've got it up on the rear stand. There wasn't much to see taking off the fairings, like I mentioned. Nothing was really bolted to anything, so it was like maybe one bolt and 2 zip ties, and everything just kind of came right apart. But yeah, Kayla's out for a walk with her friend, so somehow I'm stuck working on this. We've got a whole mess of parts. I'll show you those. Kind of a mix between like genuine OEM for like maintenance type stuff for the most part, and then some super Chinese bits and bobs, cosmetics, and just trying to get the controls ironed out, because whatever they got going on right now is not working for me, and presumably not for her either. I whipped up a little bracket to hold the turn signals and license plate, because I think everybody in the world probably thinks that those giant cowls that like stick 3 feet off the hind end of bikes these days are really ugly. This obviously isn't bolted up, that goes up there, but you get the idea. Anyway, so yeah, I guess I'm just gonna dive in on something. Ready? Mm. Huh? Okay, well, you might have seen us. We got these handlebars on, moved the clamp down a little bit so you could actually move the triple clamp down a little bit so that we could actually get the bar riser or the clip-ons to fully grab the fork leg. Then we let that back down and it just completely bottomed out the fork, which means that I'm assuming, well, I guess I don't know what it means. I'm guessing that that means there's like absolutely no fluid in these forks.
We got you. Not a chance.
Or no oil in these forks, so maybe the seals were blown or are blown, completely blown. Maybe there's nothing in these forks.
It's a total fabrication.
I don't know, they don't seem to do anything, but current hypothesis, fork seals leaked all the oil out, and that's why the front brake was greased. I don't know, so whatever, we don't have parts for that right now, but we'll have to rebuild the forks. So then we turned our attention, okay, we can do the tune-up stuff, and we were like, well, we gotta get this tank off. And I got to looking at this, and I'm like, what the hell is this? It's like duct tape or something. We're like, whatever. And we're like, oh, great. It looks like that is completely pooched. I don't want to risk snapping our only key off in there, so I grabbed a screwdriver, which clearly someone has done before. And I went to unlock this, and look at that. The whole thing comes out. And yes, that is duct tape. So, another pretty incredible, I don't know what to call this, pretty incredible piece of solution here. So anyway, I don't know what to do about this. We need to get a new one of these, preferably that either comes with a key, I'm assuming they sell that, or I don't know, if we find a new tank off of a wrecked bike or something. Whatever the case is, the gift that keeps on giving with a salvage title, trade for a dirt bike, motorcycle. So people who have owned this before us had some real MacGyvers in the mix, but we'll get her straightened out. It just means I'm gonna order more parts. I guess let's try to find something that isn't completely broken that we can move on to. Either way, I guess we can still take the tank off.
Let's do it.
At this point in the video, I just wanted to jump in real quick and mention that we're kind of finding things wrong with the bike, and we're going to start jumping around a little bit. So if you notice half-done things in the background and it feels like the video is not super cohesive, I apologize for that. It's just we would start to fix something, realize that more was broken than we thought, wouldn't have parts for it, and we would just try to keep moving on to something we did have parts for. So I apologize. I'll do my best to make something cohesive, but in case you notice that, that's what's going on. Let's see if we can get rid of this, like, oh, is this the wrong size wrench? Yes, it is. Is it good enough? Yes, it is. Yeah, this is just like a cut waiting to happen. Oh, maybe it's not. Will you give me an 11?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This bolt is like unreasonably long as well. And a flathead. I feel like that's probably not factory hardware. What do you think?
Don't cut yourself.
You're not my real mom. Can't tell me what to do. I'm assuming this used to mount an exhaust or something, and then obviously the bike has been down at least once, but how about that just does nothing anymore? At least it won't cut you. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'll be honest with you. I'm a little more familiar with like undercarriages on machines, but I mean, they're all sprockets, right? What I look for is like the flat. If that sprocket was all super worn out, you wouldn't have a flat there. That chain would wear this groove, and these would come to like almost a point. If they come to like a point like that, their slap wore out. But you can see that that's the old one. That tooth profile looks pretty decent. No like crazy thickness loss. And now they do taper at the top. That's normal. But I don't see anything crazy. I mean, compare that to the brand new one. That tooth profile looks pretty darn similar to me. See that slight taper at the top? flat spot at the top of the tooth. Doesn't look that much different. But anyway, main reason for replacing the front sprocket is because we're going down a tooth. Give us a little more acceleration, because obviously you're not working with a ton of horsepower on the 250s. So might as well try to make it a little bit fun. Okay, we've done 2 practice links, and it's gone pretty poorly both times. We've got the world's shittiest chain brake. See if we can, hopefully, this one, I'm tired of doing practice runs. It's not really getting any better, so. Here's hoping that this one goes well. Trying to take her down to 108 links here.
Do I need to count again?
You marked it. I mean, it's the one you marked.
Okay.
Not ideal. Whatever.
Okay, you said not to over tighten that.
Yeah, that lovely noise is nothing in the tool being centered. None of the holes are centered or concentric. So you just destroy the tool as you use it. It's a nice design feature. At least it's not destroying the chain as far as I know. And then another fun design feature is that this bottoms out, so you have to go as far as you can, then you have to back it out, then you have to back this all the way out.
Back that out all the way.
And you have to back this thing out so that you can remove the guide.
That's mushroomed over.
That's mushroomed over because you heard it destroying itself. Oh, good. It's good and stuck now, too. Oh, come on. Unfortunately, you have to run her without the guide to finish it off because the pin that actually, or the rod that actually pushes the pin out isn't long enough. So you have to thread this all the way back in, make sure that you get the rod, which I'll show you destroys itself as you use it, as you can tell, because none of the holes are concentric. So I'm sure you can tell that that thing is just loving life. Which is another reason why we're not doing any more practice runs, because I don't know how many more times this will survive. Then you can snug it back up and you have this much room to play, and you just hope that that's enough to push the pin the rest of the way out. Without bending the rod too much, because you still have to get past. Oh, all right. Wow, it is an absolute hunk of shit, but it did it. How about that? And there you have it. Now you slide this apart, try to find your O-rings. Oh, I even caught them.
Nice.
I keep these personally because I don't really throw anything away. And there you go. You've got 107 links, and then you add your master link. That makes your 108. In case you're wondering, what brand is this? Chinesium special Amazon one-day shipping. 10 out of 10. Do not recommend this.
I mean, if you're in a pinch like we were and need it, then...
Yeah, I mean, we bought this one because it was the one that could be here in like
this morning.
12 hours. But yeah, in general, yeah, I definitely don't recommend it. I guess 10 out of 10 doesn't really make sense, but I do not recommend it. Honestly though, like, so I'm talking shit. I think it's pretty justified. The big things are, look how absolutely not centered that hole is in that boss. Can you see that? How not concentric those holes are. What that does is means that the little thing that's trying to push the pin out of the chain is just destroying itself as you tighten it. The materials aren't hard enough, so you can tell it's all mushroomed over. And this isn't long enough. So if they could, I mean, the mechanism works. If this was drilled not so absolutely horrifically, I mean, you could hand drill that better. And if this was longer, this tool would be fine, but it isn't, and it's trash, so. I might open that hole. I mean, you don't really want to open the hole up too big because the whole idea is that it's supporting the chain and only pushing the pin through. So you can't, there's no real winning that now that it's already drilled wrong, so.
And that's not just our tool either, because I watched a video and someone else got the same kit and their hole is off center too.
I mean, maybe it doesn't need to be centered in the boss. Like maybe that's just an optical illusion, but it should be centered with wherever this ends up. So if this hole, if this is machined such that the
which it is
hole is centered in the bolt, which it certainly seems to be, then these holes need to be concentric. And they just aren't. Like even close. So, I don't know. OMT. Close but no cigar. How's that? Alright, so I don't know where we're at in the video. We've got kind of parts coming in at various times. But next on the list is we're going to tackle the clutch and the associated bits and bobs that go with that. So first we've got a T50, drain the oil out of the bottom here. Then we'll probably go ahead and pop these what look like 8s off. Change the oil filter while it's still convenient and on the case. Then we'll remove the clutch cable from the linkage and then pop all these, or no, then we need to drain the coolant because unfortunately, I don't know why, but the water pump is, I think, mounted to the case, the side case. Well, I guess that makes sense. Anyway, you gotta drain the coolant. Then I think we can take off the whole side cover and then we'll finally have access to the clutch. So yeah, in the meantime, I guess we will be replacing the oil and filter, obviously. Water pump, I think we have like a seal and bushing kit or something, and we'll get that taken care of. And then clutch, put it all back together, top off the fluids. I think that's one of the major repairs really that the bike needs right now. Well, until we discover the forks, but I guess let's get into it. Oh, wow. Why? is that so tight? I don't see any chunks. It doesn't look too shiny either, so I think we're okay. Looks really dark, especially for a motorcycle. Instead of taking this stuff out, it shouldn't be crazy tight, right? Oh wow, not tight like that. Start with the friction, end with the friction. In case it's not obvious.
You cannot see.
In case it's not
Put
obvious.
it over here on the floor.
The frictions are the ones with the little pads that actually have the friction material, and then the steels are these that are just steel rings. The friction discs are keyed or geared or tubed or whatever, keyed to the outside, so external. And the steels are keyed on the internal to the carrier. And that's how this whole thing works. Those springs push on this pressure plate, which squeeze all these together so that this thing spinning with the engine squeezes all these frictions together, which then, or maybe it's vice versa, I don't know which one, whichever one's geared to the engine, I guess this one, spins, and then the springs push that pressure plate, which squeezes all the friction discs together, which transmit that to the steels, which are keyed to the inside, and then that obviously drives the counter shaft, which has a sprocket that has the chain to the rear sprocket. And then when you pull the clutch, it pulls on this cable, which moves a little arm, which relieves that spring pressure, which then allows the springs to push the pressure plate away, and then you have no more friction, so then these things can rotate kind of independently of each other. So the things keyed to the outside stay connected to the outside, and the things keyed to the inside stay connected to the inside, but it does not lock the outside to the inside. Then you let go of the clutch, the springs push that pressure plate back down, everything squeezes, and now the outside's locked to the inside again. That's how it works. And for whatever reason, well, I shouldn't say for whatever reason, that first one looks good. I was actually kind of disappointed when I saw how good that friction, actually the outside looks good, which makes sense because it's not doing a whole lot, but the inside is trashed. Mm-hmm. So you can see, if we cleaned them up, you'd see it even better, but you can see there is very little clutch material left, or friction material left on these friction discs. Oh my gosh, that's like gone. Look at that. That is like completely gone. A little bit there, but it's no wonder why this clutch was slipping so bad. Oh, gone again. Completely gone. You can oh my gosh, you can hardly even see where the friction pads were. Can you see that?
Yeah, it looks smooth.
Oh my gosh. And I mean, we could clean these up and just look at them, but no doubt in my mind this needed done. Yeah, the inside, the innermost and outermost, which obviously aren't transmitting all of the load to the steels, look significantly better. Like that obviously looks significantly better than that. But obviously we have new steels and frictions. So we just build this stack, slap it back together, and there's your new clutch. I think you're actually supposed to soak the new discs, if I'm not mistaken.
In oil?
Yeah. For like an hour or two or something like that, I don't know.
Okay.
Friction. Steel. Friction. Steel. Friction. Okay, well I should have just ran these down with the drill. Now I know that. I've been doing this for like 5 minutes, it feels like. So we flushed it out because it had green coolant in it. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to have blue. We got new coolant anyway, so we just want to make sure the block is all cleaned out. Flushed it out with just tap water. Now we kind of want to blow that tap water out because in general you don't want to use tap water in your radiator systems. There are a lot of minerals and stuff that would settle out. And I wasn't going to spend the money to flush it with distilled water, so use tap water or well water is what we have, and then blow it out with compressed air. I've got this contraption kind of rigged up so I can somewhat push a little bit of pressure through here, and hopefully I'll be able to push any remaining water up out over there. Ready? That actually seems to be working pretty well. Great timing there, bud. How's it going, bud? Alright. You ready, Kayla? Hopefully I'll be able to lift this, but if not, we may need to each lift a side or rig up the cherry picker or something. So here you'll see a little bit of what I was referring to earlier in the video about some lapses in the chronology. In the previous clip, it probably looked like we were doing final assembly on the bike. However, while we were waiting on parts for the clips that you just watched, we discovered that the forks were just completely walloped. Like super blown seals, missing parts, the whole nine, like you'll see. But anyway, I didn't want to skip over that process, but I also wanted the video to flow a little bit better than it did in real life, like the video to flow better than the project actually went. So again, I apologize if the video gets a little choppy, but hopefully you'll enjoy us seeing us rebuild the forks and also do a little fabric cobbling, trying to get the little 250 to accept some frame sliders and swing arm spools. So that's enough jawing. I'll put some copyright-free music on, and yeah, hope you enjoy. Alright, got a 17mm here, got this loosely clamped up in the vise. Usually I bust these loose while it's still in the triple. I forgot this time, so got the impact. Hopefully they're not too crazy tight. Got the impact on one. Goes. I was able to hold that by hand, so no biggie. What horrors await? So usually what I do is just try to leave it in the order that I pull it out.
Good idea.
Dust seal back, and it should slide off the end. Then there's usually a snap ring. Indeed there is. See that snap ring? You see it? Hopefully. Oh yeah, you see it. Pop that up out of there. Try not to send it across the shop. Fork leg kind of keeps it retained for you. So there you go. Dust seal, snap ring. Then the fun part, you just kind of.
What was that?
You just kind of relive your college days, and you just crank this thing out of there, and it'll pull the fork seal out, and then there'll be a washer and a bushing underneath it. I'm gonna go over to the oil bucket to do this. So I guess B-roll camera, grab your phone. Good. And you just kind of give her a few tugs. Don't act like you don't know how. If you can see, all this is doing is using the washer and bushing underneath this to pull the fork seal out of its seat. So you just a couple tugs. Can you see it coming? Yes, you can. And there you go. Now you can pull out the last little bit that goes on the bottom of this, sits down in the. Maybe. Oh, maybe it's in this tube. There it is. That's the piece I was looking for. Oil is just holding it in. But yeah, it sits in the bottom of there, and when it's all assembled, it goes on that. It sits between. And in case you're still not following me, this is where that bolt threads in. Threads into this valve thing. So that's what I was saying, is like sometimes this will just spin inside the fork and you won't be able to loosen this. So what you have to do is, because these springs are sitting on top of here, if you can imagine all this is still in the tube, you just take the cap off and you just find something to push on this spring, and that pressure will help keep this seated so that you can actually spin the bolt. Hopefully that makes sense. They make tools to do it. I mean, if you don't have the tools, you can do it that way. I've probably done, I don't know, countless sets of forks on all of my piece of shit bikes I've had throughout the years, and
Never had the tool.
I have literally never had any of the specialty tools. You'll see how I drive fork seals here in a minute if you haven't already. I like to just use the old fork seal to drive the new fork seal home. Just kind of protects the new one. Especially because I don't have the right tool to drive the new one. Slip that old seal on there. Just right on top of the new one. Get yourself a piece of PVC that you cut in half. This one doesn't really fit because I've never played with forks this small before. This fits my other bike's forks much better, but it'll probably get the job done. And then you just wail on this thing until you drive the seal home. I just recommend not using things that are metallic because you don't want to scratch the coating on any of these surfaces. So dead blow and plastic. So with the forks disassembled, we turned our attention to getting all the components cleaned up for reassembly. It was during this cleanup that we realized we were missing some parts inside the forks. The front suspension felt terrible when test riding the bike, and I had my suspicions that it was more than just blown fork seals. We consulted a parts diagram and a repair manual that we found on the interwebs, and sure enough, we were missing a spacer that sits on top of the spring inside the fork leg. Not having that spacer meant that we lost the majority of our suspension travel because the spring wouldn't compress until the fork leg had traveled so far that it was contacting the cap. So ultimately this resulted in approximately 4 inches of free travel in the fork before we had any compression in the spring. So no bueno. At this point, I wasn't too keen on ordering parts again and waiting for delivery again. We'd already spent way too much time on this bike, and I had other projects I really needed to get back on, so we decided to use an old trick that I had seen some folks use in the past, and that is PVC. If you find the right diameter of PVC and a wall thickness that you trust, you can just cut your own spacer to the length that you need. For us, I went with a 3/4 inch Schedule 40, cut to approximately 4.5 inches, and it worked flawlessly. This might sound hacky, but I see people do this all the time on track bikes. It's a super easy, cheap, fast way to adjust the preload on your forks at the track in the pits. You just pop the fork cap off, swap out the PVC spacer with a different length one from your toolbox, slap the cap back on, and boom, you just tuned your fork preload in a matter of minutes. Regardless of whether or not this is the correct way of doing it, this worked perfectly for us and enabled us to get the bike safely back on the road. And that's all that really matters for stuff like this. You just got to get it good enough to enjoy it safely, and for us, Schedule 40 PVC was the trick this time. And then this will further explain the issue here. If you want to get a more close-up shot, or I can come over here. So if I pull this fork leg up, look at all that space before you get to the spring. Can you guys see that? Here, I'll...
Pick the back end up.
Something like that?
Yeah.
Look at all that. So from here, see if you can keep your finger right there. Stay with the fork leg.
That's gonna be hard.
Ready? Maybe I can. Look how much travel is just not suspension. From here to here. And that's why these felt like such garbage. Because you put it in the bike and it slams down to there, and your clamp is like 1/4 of an inch above that. Like the dust seal is basically just sitting on the clamp and you have zero suspension. So, what we're gonna do is take a piece of 3/4 inch Schedule 40 PVC and we're going to sit that spring just under those threads, and we'll make a mark on the PVC so we know where that is. PVC. Oh, have you already made that mark?
No, that's the old mark.
Oh, maybe put a line through that mark, please. Thank you.
Let's go down a little bit more. that block is perfect.
Okay. And then full extension. And we need to cut a piece of PVC that is this long. So rather than waste that on the end, we'll just take a measurement. I have a sneaking suspicion it's going to be like 3 inches. 3?
Yep.
It's really hard to see. 3 inches?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the 1 inch is for the threads. That's the difference up here.
Right, because your cap still has to sit in there, right? So if you kind of line this all up, everything kind of starts to make a little sense. We just don't want to waste this last inch of PVC, so we'll measure from the end, a 3-inch mark. Ta-da! Ta-da! And I will smear the mark off on accident. And I will grab pipe cutter, tube cutter. Am I still in frame?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure we're nice and square on the tube or the pipe. Whatever you're using. Are we good?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure we're good and square. Pretty on our mark. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we just cut ourselves our own little spacer. You could cut this with a chop saw or a bandsaw or a hacksaw or whatever you wanted.
Just thought this would give us the cleanest cut.
This gives you a pretty clean cut. Yeah. I mean, a bandsaw would too. It just cutting. I don't know if you ever have, but cutting or whoever's watching, cutting PVC with like a blade.
Oscillating.
Yeah, is really messy. And if you cut it with abrasives, it typically just kind of melts. So that's why we chose this method. Having trouble holding onto it because I've got oily hands. Actually having a lot of trouble holding onto it. Form workout. There we go. All right, so now got a nice clean cut. Little tiny burr on the end. So what I do is take it over to a piece of sandpaper, and I'm just gonna flush this up. If you had a belt sander, or even a disc sander, you could set it in and do the same thing. You can see the burr rolling off there. Just make sure both sides are good and flat. Then take a piece, round any burr off on the outside. Both ends. And I like to take a deburring tool and make sure you take off any burr on the inside. Did you see that? Hopefully. There you go. Just kind of
rolled over all of the edges. No sharp corners or edges anywhere, inside or out. And then, lastly, put a little acetone on a rag or paper towel or something. Okay, Kayla's getting it for me. Or just dump the acetone all over the workbench. Whatever suits, whatever floats your boat. Just teasing. I'm trying to stay in frame here. I don't know how good of a job I'm doing. Not great, I'm sure. Okay. And send her through. And again, for us, 3/4 inch worked. If you had a bigger bike with bigger forks, maybe you use 1 inch or whatever. The important thing is that it just sits nicely on top of that spring and can't go anywhere. We thought about using a PVC cap to make sure it couldn't go anywhere, but actually it ended up fitting down inside the fork and set more nicely and happily without the cap, just with the tube. So there we go. Nice, clean piece of PVC.
You probably need to do the oil first.
That sits very nicely on top of that spring and also sits very nicely on the cap. Boom. So now this has approximately 290 milliliters in it. So I'm just going to sit her upside down in here. Is that in frame?
Yep. Ooh,
Whoa, what?
you're dripping.
I'm dripping. You did. Okay. Calling her good. PVC. Oh, it's perfect. Can you see that? Just like
Not at all.
perfectly at the bottom of the threads. Got a little fresh oil on the fresh O-ring. Drop her down in there. Get her started by hand. Send her home. How's that? Yep. Boom. Got ourselves a rebuilt fork. Yep. That's how it's supposed to feel. I hope you can tell on camera the tremendous difference of what we had before versus what we have now. These things are clapped, like just absolute junk. You can just bottom them with one hand. You have like the first 6 inches of travel just isn't there. And I suspect we're missing some parts. Yeah. Okay, I'm stoked on that. Cool. You've got fresh factory fresh forks here, just for you. New seals. Ouch. New bushings. And a little Schedule 40 spacer. Cool.
Yeah, there is a little nick in that.
Yeah, there's a little nick in the chrome on this one, isn't there? Oh well. Hopefully it doesn't tear up the seal too bad. I don't anticipate this bike's going to get 1,000,000 miles. Good. Voila. We'll paint these up when we paint the tank. Let's move on to the next thing. Alright. So, next step. I want to give Kayla some frame sliders and probably some axle sliders or spools. I've heard them called. The spools are convenient so that we can lift the rear end, at least on the rear. I don't really care about the front. At least on the rear, because then you can put the rear stand on the spool rather than on the axle bolt. I want to be able to take the wheel off if it's on the rear stand. It's kind of the point. So anyway, need to figure something out there. The 250s, it's pretty common, like 600s and 1000 cc's, at least the bikes I've had usually have accommodations from the factory for these types of things. The 250s apparently do not. So first for the frame slider, we kind of mocked up the side fairing, and it looks like we would want the slider to land somewhere in here. So what I'm working on now is just got a little cardboard template. Gonna go in there like that. Bust that out of some steel. Steel fits in there. There's a nice hefty 1/4 inch plate. And I'm just gonna buzz that in between this trellis, and I'll just, maybe bzz, 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 a few inches of weld all around. And what that'll allow us to do is put the fairing up there, and then we'll be able to weld in a nut to accept the frame slider. So in order to actually locate the frame slider, the plan is, now that I have this cut, I'm just going to throw like one tack, just like one tack to hold it in place, mock the fairing back up, take a Sharpie, mark where we want the frame slider to land, because obviously I don't know where without the fairing on there. And then the idea is, once we know where we want the slider, with the fairing up there, we just mark it with a Sharpie, take the fairing back off, break this tack, pull it out, drill a hole, and then I'll weld the nut wherever it needs to be, put this all back together, weld the plate in there, and then you can just, bolt your frame slider right up in there. And that's the idea. Similarly on the back, like I mentioned, I whipped up a couple little brackets. Where I will weld this. I guess I can just show you. I'll weld this to the swing arm, probably something like this, so I can get a good bunch of weld all around it. And then the nut is captive. And then you just assemble the doodad. I don't know if we'll need a spacer or not, but we've got a little spacer in case we need it. La-di-da, la-di-da. That's welded on there. And then you just thread your spool right onto there. Looks like we won't need the spacer. But anyway, that way when you have it on the rear stand, you put the rear stand on the spool and you can still service the rear wheel, tighten your chain, maintenance your chain, do whatever you got to do. It also is nice because if you are to drop the bike, which, God forbid we never do, but then you have the spool in the back protecting the swing arm and the axle nut, and you have the slider in the front protecting the frame and most of the fairings. So basically what it does is it just kind of gives you a little leeway, I guess,
you drop the bike, yeah, you're probably going to lose mirrors and levers, but hopefully you don't have to replace all the plastics, and definitely hopefully you don't tweak the frame or tear up your swing arm, your axle, your wheels, so on and so forth. Plus it kind of protects you too, so that's the plan. Got one cut up, got these already made, so now it's just a matter of make another one of those, get everything tacked up, marked out, blah, 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 buzz them in, spritz them with some paint, move on to the next thing. Let's get dusty. Grinder dusty. It's like the worst kind of dusty. It comes out in your nose at the end of the day. You blow your nose, it's just like black. You could wear a respirator, but that sucks too. Alright, got the fairing mocked up. The plate is sitting in there. We got a little dab of grease on the end of the bolt. That's how I like to mark holes. That's where you want it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There you have it, folks. That's where she's going. I don't know if you can see or not, but there you go. That's where she's going. So hopefully you can see why I like to use grease on the end of the bolt to mark the holes. You actually get a full indication of the hole, and then oftentimes if you're careful when you like pull the bolt away, the little tit that comes off is pretty centered. So this one's not perfectly centered, but rather than having to, if you mark it with like a Sharpie, you'd have to like get a perfect center if you don't have like an actual transfer punch, which I don't. You can see the hole, the entire bolt diameter, and it's a lot easier to be able to center that up over here like on the bench. So hopefully you can finally see the plan coming together here. Our little piece of jack handle. Lines up a little bit. That one came out a little bit too long, but I can grind it down a smidge. Either way, you get the idea. Snugs up. Boom. Hell yeah. I think that came out nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Hell yeah. Now you can have it on the stand and actually service the rear wheel and chain. How about that?
With pretty much all of the mechanical issues sorted out, it was time to put a real half-ass attempt at making this bike look presentable. Don't get me wrong, the bike is in pretty decent shape, all things considered, but it's definitely still a little rough around the edges. There are a couple dents in the tank that Kayla didn't want me to fix, for the record. Some scuffs on the wheels, the usual stuff. And with that said, we never intended for this bike to be pristine. After all, it is Kayla's first bike, and we don't want her to be so afraid of damaging it that she's more focused on keeping rock chips out of the paint than she is keeping her eyes down road and having fun. So, as is customary here on StaySlyh, the bike is getting a one-day paint job with none other than whatever color tractor paint is currently on the shelf in the shop. So, similar to Henry Ford's mantra, Kayla got to choose any color she wanted, as long as it was black, or Ford blue, or potentially Massey Ferguson gray. After a couple moments of deliberation, Kayla chose black. I scuffed up the tank and we were off to the races. Figuratively. For now. After we get this thing sprayed, it's time for final assembly and finally, time to rip it down the road. We are so close. Got Kayla on her first practice. She already has her license, but this is the first time practicing on this bike. She has her license, but has very little actual seat time. But she's doing great. Look at that. Maybe she'll whip some figure eights. Finally got her to click second. Go figure. She's way more comfortable because it's a lot less jerky. Who would have thought? She actually listened to me. Look at this. Oh, professional. Honestly, setup is dialed. We've got the Aldi chair posted up next to the 5 Series. Kayla's turning laps. Oh yeah. Every now and then she just gets down into first, starts bucking, gets nervous, Jesus take the Renthals, but she's doing really good. Working on clutch and throttle control right now. Oh, look at that. Nice. We are risking it for the biscuit in the middle of the course to get you the action shot. Just working my way, keeping a telephone pole between me and God knows what Kayla's gonna do. Look at that balance. Interesting choice in speed, but impressive balance.
Yeah, I looked at you.
Yeah, why did you do that?
I can't. I'm a bad actor.
Huge thanks to anyone who's made it this far in the video. We really appreciate you guys watching, and I look forward to hearing what you guys think about the bike in the comments below. Kayla's pretty excited about it. That means I'm pretty excited about it, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. Again, thanks for watching, and until next time, stay sly.